Someone you love stops breathing. Their body is still warm. Their face looks almost the same. But something is gone, something you cannot name, cannot touch, cannot bring back. You have felt this, or you will. Every human who has ever lived has stood exactly where you are standing right now, staring at the same impossible fact. And for 300,000 years, your ancestors had no hospitals, no funeral homes, no grief counselors, no religion to hand them a ready-made answer. They had only each other, a fire, and whatever their minds could build in the dark. So what did they actually do? The first thing you need to understand is that grief is not a cultural invention. It is not something humans learned from religion or philosophy. Psychologist John Bowlby spent decades studying loss across cultures and concluded that grief is a hardwired biological response, as automatic as hunger, as physical as pain. It is what happens when an attachment bond is severed. Your nervous system registers the loss of a close person the same way it registers a wound to the body. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience, which means that 100,000 years ago, a young woman kneeling beside her dead mother in a cave in what is now Israel was not performing a ritual she had been taught. She was experiencing the same neurological storm you would experience, the same racing heart, the same disorientation, the same desperate, irrational urge to wake them up. We know she was there. We can place her. In 1988, Ofer Bar Yosef and a team of archaeologists excavating Qafzeh cave in northern Israel uncovered something extraordinary. Buried in the sediment were the remains of a young Homo sapiens woman and a child, laid deliberately into the earth, their bodies dusted with red ochre, and beside them, deer antlers placed carefully across the child's hands. Red ochre, deer antlers, deliberate placement. These are not accidents. These are choices. Someone stood over these bodies and made decisions. Someone chose what to put in the grave. Someone chose a color. That burial is 100,000 years old. So let's reconstruct what that moment might have looked like. The group is small, probably between 20 and 50 people, the kind of tight mobile band that anthropologist Richard Lee documented extensively in his fieldwork with the Qafzeh of the Kalahari in the 1960s. Everyone in the group knows everyone else. There are no strangers here. When one person dies, the group does not lose a name on a list. It loses a voice, a set of hands, a particular laugh, a specific way of telling a story. The loss is immediate, personal, and total. The body would not have been left. This is important. In almost every archaeological record we have, early humans moved their dead, deliberately, carefully, with intention. They did not simply walk away. They carried the body to a chosen place, or they dug, or they laid the person down in a position that meant something. Curled on their side like sleep, arms crossed, facing east, facing the group's territory. These details vary, but the intention behind them does not. Paul Pettit, a paleoarchaeologist at Durham University, spent years synthesizing the global evidence for intentional burial in his 2011 work on the Paleolithic origins of human burial. His conclusion is striking. The impulse to do something with the dead, to not simply abandon them, appears to be one of the oldest and most consistent behaviors in the entire human record. It predates agriculture by tens of thousands of years. It predates written language by even more. It may even predate our species. In 1960, archaeologist Ralph Seletsky was excavating Shanidar cave in the mountains of northern Iraq when he found them. The remains of at least 10 Neanderthals, buried between 60,000 and 80,000 years ago. Several of the bodies had been placed in deliberate positions. One individual, now called Shanidar I, had survived severe injuries including a withered arm and partial blindness, injuries he could not have survived alone. Someone kept him alive for years, and when he died, someone buried him. Later analysis of soil samples from one burial suggested the presence of flower pollen, raising the possibility that flowers had been placed on the body. This finding remains debated. Some researchers argue the pollen arrived naturally, carried by burrowing rodents. Others disagree. What is not debated is the deliberate placement of the bodies themselves, or the fact that a severely disabled individual survived into adulthood in a world that should have killed him quickly. That survival alone tells you something profound about how Neanderthals treated their vulnerable. And their dead. Whatever Neanderthals believed or did not believe, and we cannot know what was in their minds, they acted. They responded to death with intention. That impulse, the impulse to respond rather than simply move on, is one of the things that may define us most deeply as a genus. Now consider Sungir, a site on the outskirts of Vladimir in Russia, dated to approximately 34,000 years ago. Archaeologist Otto Bader excavated 2 children buried head-to-head in a long grave. And on their bodies, sewn meticulously into their clothing, covering them from head to foot, were nearly 10,000 mammoth ivory beads. Each bead had been individually carved and drilled. Researchers estimated that producing all of those beads would have required thousands of hours of labor. Thousands of hours. For 2 dead children. Think about what that means in practical terms. A small group of hunter-gatherers, living in a world where every hour of work either feeds you or keeps you warm, chose to spend thousands of hours making beads to bury with people who could no longer use them. This is not a survival calculation. This is something else entirely. This is the evidence of belief. Belief that the dead continue in some form, that what you send with them matters, that the ceremony is worth the cost. Christopher Henshelwood's work at Blombos cave in South Africa pushed our understanding of symbolic human behavior even further back, to 75,000 years ago and beyond. The ochre found there, engraved with geometric patterns, connects to the same red ochre found in burials across the ancient world. Color as meaning, marking as intention. The same impulse that led someone to engrave a stone at Blombos also led someone to dust a body with red at Qafzeh. The same cognitive leap. The same need to make the invisible visible. But burial and ceremony were only part of how early humans handled death. The other part was memory. Polly Wiesner is an anthropologist who spent decades living among the Qafzeh of the Kalahari, one of the most extensively studied hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. In her 2014 study on Firelight conversations, Wiesner found something unexpected. When she cataloged what people actually talked about around the fire at night, the dead appeared constantly. Names were spoken. Stories were told. Someone who had been gone for years was suddenly present again in the circle. Their voice reconstructed from memory, their decisions reanalyzed, their jokes repeated. The dead were not gone. They had been moved to a different location, into story, into name, into the group's living memory. Every time someone said the name, the person existed again for a moment. Every story kept them from disappearing entirely. This is what your ancestors had instead of gravestones. They had voices. They had fire. They had each other. And here is the part that should stop you. For most of human history, death was not hidden. It was not managed by professionals in a separate building. It was not cleaned up before you arrived. Your ancestors washed the body themselves. They carried it. They sat beside it through the night. They felt the weight of it, literally, physically. The grief was not processed in a private room. It was shared openly, in front of everyone, and everyone was expected to feel it, to show it, to let it move through the group together. Modern grief researchers increasingly argue that our current model, the quiet, private, managed, time-limited grief of contemporary life, may be the historical anomaly. Not the rule. The rule, for 300,000 years, was communal. Loud, embodied, shared around a fire in the dark. You wake up one morning and someone is gone. The world looks exactly the same and completely different at the same time. Your ancestors felt that too. They sat with it. They named it. They buried it in the earth with red ochre and deer antlers and 10,000 ivory beads. And then they said the name again. Out loud. Into the fire. Because that is how you keep someone from disappearing entirely. That is how humans have always done it.